This week we've seen the sort of wave of anguish and outrage on the left unparalleled since Election Day 2016, and all because of this man and this bird. Let's take a look. So Elon Musk has bought Twitter, and a lot of people have been tweeting angrily about it, which is good for Twitter, I suppose. Musk started buying shares in January, sometime before disclosing his intention to build up a major stake, and by all accounts at that point not intending to go for a full takeover. It's possible, although these things are not always quite how they're publicly presented, that he began seriously considering the takeover when Twitter locked the satirical news site, the Babylon Bee, out of its account following its publication of this tweet. It was mocking USA Today's naming of the transgender Biden official Rachel Levine as Woman of the Year. It instead named him as Man of the Year and got the Babylon Bee a notice from Twitter that it would be locked out of its account until it deleted the tweet. The Babylon Bee chief executive Seth Dillon said that they had no intention of deleting it, and he later confirmed that Elon Musk had contacted him to confirm that the Bee had been locked out, and in that call mused that he might have to buy Twitter. You have to wonder at what's going through the mind of the Twitter staffer who made that censorship call against the Babylon Bee at that time. Did I ever mention on this channel about actions having consequences? There you go. Now, what's remarkable in standard business terms is how fast the board of Twitter, having initially talked about defending themselves with a poison pill measure, they folded within days. A standard corporate takeover would see the process of a formal response by the board, usually making the case that the bid undervalues the company and what a bright future it has under the current regime. And the bidder will have to do a detailed pitch, talking about what they will do. The company will do a detailed defence. Maybe then the bidder will raise the price until the company concludes that they are obliged to accept. And that can run over months. Not this one. Musk offered a price, take it or leave it. Twitter retreated behind closed doors and looked worried. But it was when Musk came up with the goods, the cash and the shares package that showed he had arranged the funding for his bid, that the board almost immediately caved. Obviously, the big noise about all of this has been free speech. As viewers of this channel know, I am a huge supporter of free speech. Few things get me on my soapbox quite so often. It's a theme that the two sides of a polarised discourse interpret in very different ways right now. And that wasn't always the case, but it certainly is today. For the people of the left on Twitter, there is a remarkably loud wailing and gnashing of teeth, not heard at this volume since Trump won in 2016. This is the end of the world, apparently. To a remarkable extent, that seems beyond all proportion, and scores of them are promising that they will be closing their Twitter account forthwith, countered only by a similar number of people mocking them openly, because of course the vast majority of them are likely to do no such thing. They expressed fear that free speech in Elon Musk's conception will lead to Twitter becoming awash with toxic violent threats, hate speech and misinformation. Or as the Babylon Bee put it, people on Twitter scared that Musk buying Twitter means it will be full of mean people being nasty to each other. Because obviously that's not at all how it is at the moment. The Left Foot Forward website summed up the response like this. Conservatives as well as far-right groups are delighted at the news that Elon Musk has struck a deal to buy Twitter for $44 billion, with Republican lawmakers amongst those who are pleased that the free speech absolutist will be taking over the social media platform. One thing they really fear, of course, is the return of one of those Republicans in particular, namely former President Trump. Given that everyone currently expects Democrats to get a midterm pasting this year, and the dawning awareness that the current incumbent and vice president are not likely to end their terms as an electoral asset, for some, Trump getting back on Twitter might well guarantee him a second term. Now that precludes an option you'd think would be in their hands. You know, that maybe if they could come up with a moderate candidate who can speak in complete sentences and walk in a straight line without bumping into stuff, that they might be able to beat Trump on their own merits. That idea passes for magical thinking these days, so apologies for even mentioning it. Trump has said that he has no intention of returning, that instead he's committed to his own new social media platform, Truth Social. You know, the one which to date he's posted on just once. There is some scepticism meeting that claim, probably well placed. Let's put it this way, if Trump had said he would be returning to Twitter if given the chance, first it would open the door to a humiliating rebuff if he wasn't given that chance. There's no guarantee that Musk will do that. But secondly, in that one statement, he would kill Truth Social stone dead. I mean, it may barely be living in any case, but once someone has poured considerable money and reputation into something, it's always a strong push for them to keep going with it so as not to lose that investment. And this is a common phenomenon. In fact, it has a name, the sunk cost fallacy. Trump clearly is not ready to write off the money that he spent just because Twitter has changed hands. But let's put it this way, if Trump does run for president in 2024, that Twitter account is going to be up and hyperactive. Why that should be the end of the world isn't clear. Meanwhile, others who weren't overly excited include Twitter employees. Quotes that were shared from the internal Slack channels of the company included quotes like, "I feel like I'm going to throw up. I really don't want to work for a company that is owned by Elon Musk." Another said, "I hate him. Why does he even want this? He doesn't know anything about our policies and what we do. His statement about our algo was effing insane." Well, I expect he will read those policies, so that should solve that problem, and then he'll probably suggest how they should be changed. Or not. Kinda his choice. You know, I hold no particular candle for Elon Musk. He's done some impressive things, and I appreciate anyone who has taken big risks to get where he is. But also, he overpromises consistently. He is a huge narcissist, has a habit of doing extremely ill-judged things like calling innocent people paedophiles. Nevertheless, I found myself defending his buying of Twitter against some extremely bad takes. So a number of the climate science community, mostly those who are also very much political activists as well, which is only a minority but a high profile and vocal one, they were deeply concerned. Chiefly, they were worried that all the good work to date done to ban a certain amount of climate misinformation would all come flooding back. Climate activist scientist Michael Mann, for instance, who said this, absent a commitment from Musk and the board that there will be a strict firewall protecting the medium from his meddling and influence, the independence and objectivity of Twitter is now fundamentally threatened. That's the thing about free speech, of course. It's not free unless the other people have it as well. But also, I'm not entirely sure that Michael Mann understands how this works. Musk owns the company now. He can do what he likes with it. Why would you wholly own a company and then put in place a mechanism that meant you couldn't take the key decisions about how it works? I wouldn't do that. I'm kind of guessing neither would Michael Mann. Twitter founder Jack Dorsey had said that one of the biggest obstacles to being able to run Twitter better was its status as a stock-listed company with all the pressures that come with that to maximise returns to shareholders. For better or for worse, Musk will not have that, and Dorsey himself released a statement saying he believed this would be a positive thing for Twitter's development. But the other very common take that I saw from the climate community was people saying things like, "I'm feeling sick just thinking about all the things he could have done with that $44 billion. And they then go into whatever their pet project would be, ending deforestation, ending world hunger, etc., etc. Which just highlights how little these people understand about how wealth gets created in the first place and how this venture is actually being funded. Because first, Musk did not just pull $44 billion out of his pocket. Half of that is debt, and debt will carry with it probably about $1 billion per year repayment on the interest alone. So no, you can't just do that and then go handing it out as charity. It's an investment in a business that, will provide good public service, All the people whining about this were doing so on Twitter, so presumably they find it useful. And crucially, it will create a return. Musk has said that maximising the finance isn't his interest in this. It's about the public good from the digital town square. That doesn't mean it won't need to generate a decent return. Second, I find it weird that climate scientists and activists are so negative about the man, the erratic man for sure, but nevertheless the man who set up a car company that popularised the electric car, really shook up the industry to see that as the future, and in so doing pushed the development of large-scale battery storage, also invested in a solar power company. What does an entrepreneur have to do to get some credit with these folks? And the answer is then, give away all your money on worthy green causes rather than investing it in businesses. Don't be rich, in other words. But this is the basic problem of the mindset on the left. Don't get me wrong, there are equivalent problems on the other side. But right now we're talking about this one. The mindset that sees wealth redistribution in the absence of wealth creation. Musk made a shed load of money from PayPal, then he risked it all by investing in Tesla and SpaceX. Both of those were highly uncertain bets. For a significant period, he could easily have ended up bankrupt and with nothing. But he worked 18-hour days, had skilled people doing the same, and they made it work. And then that made them more money. Would it have been better if he had given it to feed the poor when he came out of PayPal? Well, some would have said so, but if he had, guess what? The poor would be hungry again, because giving them money doesn't solve poverty, except, of course, until the money runs out, which it would very quickly. So then we wouldn't have had Tesla. Probably the motor industry would still be resisting the end of the internal combustion engine in its old form. So what has Musk actually said that he would like to do now that he has control of Twitter? Enhance a product with new features, which will succeed or fail based on what those features are and how well implemented they are, of course. Make the algorithm open source, and that will be the really revolutionary change. And there's a strong argument for it. To be fair, I haven't yet heard the argument against. Let's not presume there isn't one beyond self-interest. Nevertheless, Musk's argument is that it needs to be transparent because it then creates trust. And that goes to the heart of the dilemmas with social media more broadly at the moment, particularly the lack of trust in it. Right now, both sides of the political divide swear that their side is discriminated against by the algorithm. People have said that they believe they were being shadow banned. It would be good, wouldn't it, to have a moment of reckoning where we discovered actually what has been the historical evolution of the algorithm and who was right about what during those times. He also said that he's committed to defeating the spam bots. Now, I can't understand why anyone would be against that if they were against disinformation. And finally, authenticating all humans. For me, that's what the blue check mark should be. So far it's been this weird, slightly snobby thing of something you get granted if you're considered important enough, the criteria for which have been pretty opaque. It should be something you get if you can prove you're tweeting in your real identity or an organisation that's doing so likewise. Not prohibiting anonymous accounts, but giving extra recognition, maybe some functional privileges, to those verified as belonging to a named human. Again, don't see why anyone should mind that, but mind it they do. At one point yesterday, the New York Times had no fewer than 3 editorials, all railing against Elon Musk. Personally, I think all of these takes are missing the point. Freedom of speech issues are incredibly important, and I welcome the idea Twitter will become more robust. But in spite of the amount it's discussed, the freedom of speech issues on Twitter are actually relatively light. Relatively small number of high-profile individuals who got barred, easily reversed. A few aspects of the algorithm that enforced an orthodoxy, maybe without realising it wasn't universal truth because they were in their own bubble. And as Musk himself observed in relation to the Hunter Biden story in the 2020 election, Suspending the Twitter account of a major news organisation for publishing a truthful story was obviously incredibly inappropriate. We can all name the examples when it censored what should have been lawful speech, but that's the point. We know about those because across the whole user base, they were actually pretty rare. High profile, important, pivotally important, but relatively rare. Those things can be fixed very easily, and they should be. If we're being fair though, outside of those obviously politically motivated failures, Twitter has generally been pretty strong on defending free speech in other contexts. The website TechDirt made the point. Twitter's legal team has been one of the most aggressive, if not the single most aggressive, companies in defending the privacy and free speech rights of its users. From early on, when various entities, both private and public, have sought to unmask anonymous Twitter users, the company has gone out of its way to defend the right to anonymity and to push back on questionable subpoenas that seek to unmask people over First Amendment protected speech. There's an open question about whether Elon Musk's comments about authenticating humans would even potentially mean a pushback against that level of protection of free speech. But genuine free speech elements, not as bad as some would suggest, and can be fixed. What is harder to fix is the core aspect of a platform, that it thrives by monetizing polarization. Why is it that there were such extreme hot takes all over Twitter over the last couple of days? Well, partially at least, because the power users get selected for those who thrive by using the algorithm to maximize their power and reach, and the algorithm grants that power and reach to those who find entertaining ways to outgroup certain people. Nasty, mean, sarcastic tweets do fantastically well, courteous and or constructive discussion much less so. So Twitter has trained its user base to devalue good faith conversations and has rewarded them for shallow virtue signalling. People often complain about rampant virtue signalling, but all the algorithms reward it to a large degree. People follow incentives, and that's a problem, by the way, with all platforms. Like the story about YouTuber Trevor Jacob, who reportedly faked a plane crash in the name of viral video. Following the incentives. A modern-day Martin Luther King would say that he dreamed of the day when a man might be judged by the quality of his arguments, not the number of his retweets. I have a dream indeed. In any case, in spite of my mixed feelings about Musk, I wish him well on this particular task he's taken on. I suspect he doesn't quite realise the nature of the thankless job that he's about to endure. Now he has a company which, if you look at the figures of who its employees donated to, has a solid 98% plus Democrat-leaning workforce, all of whom probably almost certainly hate what he wants to do next and will try to actively obstruct it. It will be an interesting experiment, and I'm generally thinking it will be an important step in the evolution of social media. If we're going to find a way of doing this that isn't virally destructive to our society and to our democracy, it will be through a number of incremental steps like this. Even if this experiment fails, it may well be the failure that was needed to find the next way, the way that will work better. And that's how the tech firms always said they did innovation. Move fast and break things, remember? Musk did that with PayPal. And he then kind of learned how not to break things quite so easily with SpaceX, where the consequences are rather bigger. It could be that he is now the right man for the moment, however short that moment turns out to be. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please share with anyone else you think would also enjoy it. Word of mouth is really important to us. And if you've not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? As the saying goes, that subscribe button won't smash itself.